What take is it? 100th? Okay, this time I'll do it perfectly. So hey guys, what's up everyone, and welcome to Everyday JavaScript. In this video we are going to look at the third part of JavaScript, the hard parts. This is the 100th take of this video, so please do watch this video till very end. So much effort has gone into this. Yeah, so in this part we are going to talk about call stacks, a very important part of JavaScript engine. I'll tell you why it is important and how it actually is being used inside JavaScript engine. So let's get started. If you don't know, we have a channel named Everyday JavaScript. We have just crossed 1300 people in the community, and if you like the content, do subscribe. Do not forget to subscribe and leave your comment and like this video. So just go ahead and subscribe this channel. If you see that button red, make sure you make it gray and turn that video off. Yeah. So JavaScript thread of execution, we saw this in the last video. If you have not seen that video, you can just go ahead and reference that over here or there, or probably wherever you see the hint in the card. It has two tasks to be done. It weaves in and it weaves out of an execution context. Now we had this example in the previous video. What happens if we provide this 8 to 10 lines of code to JavaScript to be executed, to JavaScript engine to be executed? What JavaScript engine does is takes all these 8 to 10 lines of code and virtually wraps it inside a global function. It's an hypothetical global function. It does not exist. I'm just making it up. But to understand it easily, it wraps all the given code to be executed inside a global context or a global function and then executes that function. That's how basically your code starts executing, right? Yeah, simple. As soon as you think that you have to execute some code, first thing that comes into mind is function. So that's what the example I took over here. So basically, we start executing our code as soon as this global is called. Now, when JavaScript encounters first function to be executed, it let's say multiply by 2. It has to do it has to switch from this global context and it has to weave into the context of this function, right? Multiply by 2, and then it will start executing this mini program of 2 lines within this context, within this new context. You remember the term global context and execution context that we had used? If not, you can check out the video. Now, so over here, once the code is finished executing and it has to come out of this execution context, which is indicated by this return keyword, or in other cases the last statement of the function. As soon as it has to come out, it weaves out of the inner context, the local execution context, and comes back to the global context. So that's what basically thread of execution does. It weaves in from the global context into the local context, and it weaves out from the local context to global context. That's all it does. Weave in, weave out, weave in, weave out. And that's how JavaScript keeps track of everything, what it needs to execute. Let's go ahead. In the previous example, if you saw, right, there's a very dirty handwriting that I got a feedback. So this is where we left off in the previous video. I got a feedback that my handwriting was shitty. So I made an attempt to make it less shittier. And now this is less shittier version of the same thing. So basically, this is where we left off. We had this particular program and we had our global execution context, which is a combination of thread of execution and memory, right? Global execution context, which is a combination of thread of execution and memory. It started executing with that particular thing. And as soon as it encountered first function to be executed on line number 7, that is multiply by 2, it weaved into an execution context which was local to that function. Hence, the thread of execution and local memory was used over here. It executed the code in context of this particular memory. Pretty much simple, right? As soon as that particular function was over, function finished executing all its code, and which was indicated by this return statement over here, it weaved out and moved on to the new line, and it viewed out and came back to the global execution context. So earlier it was let's say line 1, it was global execution context. It came to line 7, it encountered, oh, I need to execute a function. Switched to the local execution context, executed all the code, switched back out, viewed out. And again in the next line it viewed back into the local execution context and switched back out. Right? Came back to the global execution context. Now this was the example. I'll come back to the drawing board with the help of diagrams again. What happens over here, as I said, it virtually wraps the entire code into this global function. Remember that. I'll come back to this thing. So this is our call stack, the main topic of the video. JavaScript needs to keep track of what function is currently running. Over here, everything that I explained you visually, I'll go over here in the previous slide. Let me jump over here to the previous slide. Yeah. So, okay, it went way too back. Here. So everything over here visually looks very simple in explanation, right? You were in the global context, you move into local context. As soon as you encountered return statement, you moved out back to the global context. And as soon as you found out that another function needs to be executed, you moved into the context of that another function and then viewed out again to the global context. That looks visually very simple and easy to understand. But now consider you have thousands and thousands of small functions. JavaScript does need to track that accurately and precisely, right? So that's where call stack comes into picture. JavaScript has to track the information of what function is currently running and where the current thread of execution is. It is primarily because the nature of execution in JavaScript is single threaded. That's why it has to keep track of what function it's currently running. So if you run a function, you add it to a stack. If you finish a function, you remove it from the stack. The current function that is getting executed will be always a function that is on top of the stack, top of the call stack. So that's pretty simple. Let's jump to the drawing board and see how we can draw the previous examples, previous code's call stack. I'll just go and switch to the drawing board. Here we are, and let's jump to our code back again. So now remember, as I told you, we have a global function, hypothetical wrapped function around all the code that we pass to JavaScript engine to be executed, right? So that means our call stack would have first item that is currently being executed as global. Right? So this is the current function that is getting executed, and I'll just put an arrow over here. Now you move to line number 7. It encountered a function multiply by 2. And you're passing num, which is basically 3, right? So that means it has to now switch context to this one. So it has to switch context to this function, line number 2. So as soon as it encounters that it has to switch context, it adds that new function that is getting executed on the top of the stack. So we are now executing function multiply by 2. That is getting called from line number 7. So I'll just switch again and add this new function over here, which is multiply by 2. So this is the current function that is getting executed. And the call stack moves from the below layer to this layer. So this gets removed call stack moves from the below layer to this top function that is getting executed. Now it encounters a return statement. As soon as it encounters return statement, that means that it has to pop out multiply by 2. That means that it has to switch context from local context to the global context. So that means that it is switching from this context of multiply by 2 and moving back to the code that is getting executed in context of global execution context. So what I'll do over here is I'll remove this top layer. I'll remove this top function as well. It's pretty difficult to remove. And it moves back to this level. Right? Coming to line number 8. Again, we have to execute multiply by 2 and with number 10. So that means that again in our call stack, it adds this function over here. So we'll just switch back and add this function again. And we'll be executing this code. Oops, it has to be off. So it's executing this code now. As soon as it encounters return result, that means that it has to pop it again and it will come back to the global execution context. So which is line number 8. When the function has finished executing, it will again come back to this global execution context. Finally, at the end of the day, there should only be one function being executed in the call stack. So this thing is known as call stack. So if you have enjoyed this video, I hope you have understood this thing first. If you enjoyed this video, do like and subscribe this channel, and do provide your comments about the feedback about this video. And that's pretty much it. I'll continue in the next part of this JavaScript, the hard part series. And till then, keep watching and stay safe. Thank you.